Grim discovery that may be tied to a decades-old mystery. Were found at a building next to the Vatican in Rome.
How could something so historically important just be forgotten?
The Vatican is one of the last places on Earth that allows open excavation.
Be one of the first to experience this cutting-edge technology exhibition, and it's located on the rooftop of the Basilica behind the dome.
Everything beneath it is tightly controlled, sealed, and rarely touched. So when archaeologists were finally permitted to investigate a small area under St. Peter's Basilica, no one expected anything unusual.
Decides to open an investigation, this could become a place of worship, a place of great pilgrimage.
But the moment they broke through the first layer, they found unfamiliar symbols and an older structure completely out of place beneath the Roman foundations. What they uncovered forced experts to rethink everything they believed about Vatican history. A Pope's simple request. When Pope Pius XI passed away in early 1939, the Vatican entered a period of mourning at the same time the rest of Europe was heading into crisis. Germany had already taken aggressive steps into neighboring regions, alliances were shifting, and many governments were preparing for the possibility of another war. Inside the Vatican, the atmosphere was tense because leaders understood that the world was moving toward conflict. In the midst of this uncertainty, attention turned to the late Pope's final request. He wanted to be buried in the grotto beneath St. Peter's Basilica. It was a modest request on the surface, but the grotto was already crowded with centuries of papal tombs and important burial chambers. Architects and engineers were sent in to inspect the grotto. They moved slowly through narrow corridors, measured the available space, and compared it to the size needed for a new papal resting place. The more they examined the layout, the clearer it became that the floor would need to be lowered. Without lowering it, there would not be enough vertical space for the tomb. Lowering the floor meant removing layers of stone and soil that had not been disturbed for generations. It also meant digging directly under the main altar of the basilica, which was a move no one took lightly.
So historically important, just be forgotten.
Yes, this is really a mystery.
This forced the team to confront a much larger problem. Above the grotto stood Michelangelo's dome, an enormous structure that placed tremendous pressure on the foundations below. The basilica had been built in the 16th century, and its foundations were never intended to support modern excavation work. Engineers reminded Vatican officials that any miscalculation could weaken the base of the building. A single mistake could lead to cracks or destabilization. They were dealing with one of the most important and recognizable structures in the world. The possibility of causing damage brought real concern and stress into the discussion. Despite the risk, the Vatican approved the work. They selected a small group of workers for the task. These men were the Sampietrini, the Vatican's own craftsmen whose families had worked inside the basilica for generations.
A tunnel like this that stretches from an important religious monument, like the Tomb of Christ, it even has a shaft straight up to the floor.
According to internal accounts, they were trusted because they understood the sacred nature of the site and because they knew how to work quietly. Their instructions were clear. They were not to discuss the project with anyone. They needed to keep their movements controlled and avoid drawing attention. When the Sampietrini entered the grotto and prepared their equipment, they understood the seriousness of the task. They expected to remove old flooring and compacted soil, nothing more. However, within moments of beginning the excavation, their tools struck something that none of them had anticipated. Shovel strike stone. The first strike of the shovel was meant to loosen compacted soil. Instead, the workers heard a sharp metal sound that stopped everyone in the grotto. It was the kind of sound that told them they had not hit earth. They had hit something solid. The Sampietrini froze for a moment, unsure of what they had encountered. They had been told to expect layers of old stone flooring, but the echo that bounced through the chamber suggested something far heavier and older. They cleared the area carefully. Each movement was slow, steady, and controlled because they knew they were working beneath an important structure. As the dust settled, a curved line of stone began to appear. It was not a flat surface. It had a smooth, arching shape that immediately caught their attention. The workers called for the engineers, and together they brushed away the remaining soil. What emerged was the top of an ancient Roman arch. The sight of it caused immediate confusion because no one had expected any Roman structure at that depth. The engineers studied the arch and compared it to drawings and historical records. The more they examined it, the more convinced they became that this was not just any Roman structure. According to reports from the team, the shape and stonework matched the architectural style of the 4th century. This meant they had broken into the roof of the original Constantinian basilica. That basilica was believed to exist beneath the current one, but no modern team had ever made physical contact with its remains. Now they were standing on it. The discovery changed everything. This forced the Vatican to approve deeper excavation. The leadership understood that they had uncovered something historically important, and they wanted to know exactly what lay beneath their feet. The Sampietrini continued removing debris with even greater caution. They worked in small sections, clearing soil and broken stone one handful at a time. As they did, they found more fragments of ancient construction. Pieces of columns, old brick patterns, and sections of carved stone slowly came into view. Each new fragment made the situation clearer. The Constantinian basilica had not been built on empty ground. It had been placed on top of earlier structures. The Roman arch they uncovered proved that more than one historical layer existed beneath the basilica. The workers had expected to adjust the level of a floor. Instead, they realized they were standing above the remains of an older building that no one had seen in centuries. The small opening created by the workers widened with each careful movement. Soil continued to fall away until the gap became large enough to allow a lamp to be lowered into the darkness. When the light finally dropped below the arch, it revealed the first sign that an entire world waited beneath them. A city of the dead. They lowered the lamp into the opening and watched the light move across the stones below. What appeared beneath them was not a chamber, it was a street. For the first time in modern memory, archaeologists were looking directly into a Roman necropolis that had remained closed for more than 1,600 years. The air below was cold, and a thin layer of dust lifted when the workers shifted their weight. The team stood in silence for a moment, trying to understand the scale of what they were seeing before the urgency to document everything took over. The lanes beneath the basilica ran in straight lines that resembled small streets. Tombs stood on either side like tiny houses. Each tomb had a doorway and a compact front section that made it clear these were built to be visited. Some entrances had shallow niches that may have held statues. Other doorways had rusted hooks where lamps once hung. The structure and layout suggested careful planning by families who expected that loved ones would return to these spaces. As the workers removed compacted silt, mosaic floors appeared. Small square tiles formed clean geometric designs.
Also, we can spot missing tiles or pieces of the basilica that might be worn off.
In several rooms, faint images of birds and vines remained visible. In one tomb, a painted ceiling still held patches of color. These details showed that the people buried here had resources and expected their burial places to reflect status. Inscriptions in Latin and Greek gave names, family titles, and short messages that confirmed these were well-established families. Archaeologists also found funerary offerings. Coins remained in shallow recesses. Broken cups and small jars held traces that laboratory teams later reported could be wine or oil. Carved symbols appeared on stone slabs, and several of these carvings matched images known from pagan funerary traditions. Archaeologists interpreted these objects as ritual offerings that were part of burial customs meant to honor the dead. While mapping the necropolis, the team noticed patterns. Tombs grouped together in a way that suggested family plots. Many faced the same direction. The distribution was orderly rather than random. This matched what a few ancient writings had suggested. Vatican Hill was a major burial area long before Christianity became dominant. The necropolis also carried signs of deliberate concealment. Soil and rubble had been packed over the tombs in layers. According to excavation reports, the fill had a uniform pattern that suggested intentional placement. The builders who constructed the Constantinian basilica likely covered the necropolis to create a stable foundation for the new church. This was not a burial created by time. It appeared to be controlled and planned. As the team moved deeper into the necropolis, the masonry suddenly changed. The stones became larger and more tightly fitted. The work no longer resembled the smaller tomb fronts. It was a heavy wall of solid stone that cut across the burial lanes. The workers whispered among themselves as they examined it. The size and style of the wall did not match anything they had seen so far. When they traced its line, they realized it stretched beyond the small street and into a deeper part of the site. They did not yet understand what it connected to, but following it would take them toward a part of Rome's past that the Basilica was never meant to reveal. The Circus and the Crucifixion. As the team followed the massive stone wall through the necropolis, its size and construction became even clearer. The blocks were thicker, heavier, and set with a level of strength that did not match the surrounding tombs. Archaeologists compared the dimensions and layout with known Roman structures, and according to several reports, the evidence pointed to something far larger than a burial enclosure. The wall belonged to the Circus of Nero. This was the arena where emperors held private races, public shows, and violent displays meant to entertain the elite. The discovery changed the tone of the excavation. The workers were no longer stepping through a quiet city of the dead. They were standing in a place connected to brutality and fear. The Circus of Nero was known from ancient writings, but its exact footprint had long been debated. Now the team had found part of its foundation. The thought that this enormous structure lay directly beneath the basilica brought a mix of shock and fascination. In the 1st century, this arena was used for chariot races and theatrical displays. It was also used for public executions. Several Roman historians wrote that the circus became a stage for punishing people considered threats to the empire. The archaeologists paused when they realized the wall in front of them once supported seating where large crowds had gathered to watch violent events. Among the victims brought to this place were early Christians. Ancient sources such as Tacitus described how Christians were targeted after the Great Fire of Rome. These accounts reported that executions were carried out inside Nero's private grounds, which included the circus. The team understood that they were walking inside a landscape tied to one of the darkest chapters of early Christian history. Some historians believe that this is where Peter was executed because he was not a Roman citizen and therefore faced a harsher form of punishment. Tradition holds that Peter was crucified nearby, possibly within sight of the circus wall the workers were now touching. This connection helped explain another detail in the necropolis. Christian tombs were heavily concentrated near this section of the site. The closer the team moved toward the wall, the more Christian symbols they found. Archaeologists believe this pattern shows early believers wanted to be buried near what they considered the place of Peter's martyrdom. According to some researchers, families may have chosen these plots so they could rest beside the memory of the man they viewed as the founder of their community in Rome. The workers also began to understand why Constantine selected this hill for the first basilica. It had been a swampy and unpleasant area, yet Constantine built his most important church here. The location made sense if he believed it protected the burial place of Peter. This gave the site spiritual weight that overshadowed the difficult terrain. As they followed the line of the circus wall, the team noticed another unsettling change. The quality of the surrounding structures shifted. The tomb suddenly stopped, and the ground opened into a small enclosed pocket of earth. It felt separate from the rest of the necropolis, almost hidden by design. The workers stepped into the space cautiously. They expected ordinary decoration or simple stone. Instead, the surfaces around them held markings that did not look like decorations at all. The red wall and the pilgrims' scratchings. The team moved cautiously into the quiet pocket of earth and came face to face with a wall painted a deep red. It stood out immediately. The color had survived because this area had been sealed from weather and human traffic for centuries. The wall acted as a retaining face for a small niche in the slope, and built into that face was a simple stone shrine. The shrine was modest in design. 2 small pillars supported a flat slab that made a crude table. It was not ornate, but its placement and construction made clear that it served a purpose beyond decoration. Around the shrine, the plaster was covered with scratched letters. The marks were not the careful chisel work of sculptors. They were rough and hurried, as if made by hands that could not stay long. Some of the inscriptions were single names. Other scratches read like short prayers. Many invoked the name Peter. The team found petitions asking for help and brief notes of gratitude. According to excavation reports, several of these were written in Greek and some in Latin. The presence of multiple languages suggested that people from different parts of the Mediterranean came to this spot. Symbols were mixed in with the words. The fish motif appeared repeatedly. Anchors and a stylized monogram of Christ showed up in several places. Archaeologists familiar with early Christian signs saw the same coded imagery used by communities that practiced their faith in secret. Some researchers believe that these symbols functioned as a quiet language. According to those scholars, a fish could signal fellowship, an anchor could mean hope, and the monogram could identify the site as Christian without making an obvious public claim. The shrine itself matched descriptions recorded in 2nd century writings. Those texts, which some historians consider credible, mention a simple memorial or trophy that recorded the presence of apostolic figures in the area. The shrine under the red wall fit these descriptions closely. For many on the team, this felt like a direct link to early Christian memory. It suggested that people were returning here long before Constantine to leave marks of devotion. The graffiti had a raw quality that made the archaeologists pause. The letters were often cut into plaster in a cramped style. Some lines overlapped earlier lines as if writers had not cared to find blank space. The scratches felt urgent. Several team members reported that the marks seemed to be left by people who came during times of danger. According to some historians, these inscriptions likely date to a period when Christianity was illegal and persecuted. If that reading is accurate, coming here to leave a prayer was an act of risk. The team photographed and traced each inscription carefully. They copied letters, cataloged motifs, and logged the exact locations of the symbols on the wall. For the archaeologists, this was painstaking work. For the workers who had spent years under the basilica, it felt more like a moment of quiet reckoning. A few of them touched the wall with reverence. Others held back, wary of disturbing a place that seemed charged with memory. Beneath the shrine, hidden behind a simple cover, a shallow marble niche waited. It was barely noticeable until the light struck the lip of its opening. According to older, unverified accounts that circulated among local workmen, something had once been set inside that niche. For years, no one in the official records mentioned its contents. The team prepared to lift the marble cover with care. What they were about to reveal should have altered the course of the excavation. Had anyone understood its meaning sooner? A forgotten niche in the bones no one expected. They eased the marble cover away and peered into a small, shallow niche. Inside, carefully arranged and wrapped in fragments of cloth, lay human bones. At first glance, they looked like a jumble, but under close inspection, the workers saw order. The bones had been placed deliberately. Long bones were aligned, skull fragments rested in a corner, and a cluster of hand bones lay together as if set on purpose. In one area, the team counted many finger bones packed tightly in a small space. The arrangement suggested someone had taken care to place remains into a secure spot. The workers documented everything with swift hands and nervous voices. They photographed the niche, logged the find, and reported it up the chain. What happened next was not a single decision but a series of disagreements. Some of the archaeologists wanted to remove the bones for immediate study. Others argued for more careful in situ recording before any disturbance. Monsignor officials, according to internal accounts, pushed for caution because of the religious sensitivity of the site. With no clear consensus, the bones were lifted, placed into a wooden box, and stored in a guarded room beneath the basilica. At the time, that action felt like the safest option. No one realized how consequential the choice would be. Years passed. War and then reconstruction diverted attention and resources. The wooden box sat in a storage closet that saw little traffic. Workmen who moved through the grotto later reported that they had seen boxes stacked in the dark, but the contents were not always noted in official logs. Later investigators found the box by chance while searching for earlier records. When they opened it, the bones inside were in the same careful order recorded in the original photographs. The bones had not been scattered or handled roughly. Their placement still suggested reverence rather than casual disposal. Preliminary examinations were cautious and careful. According to reports from the laboratory teams, the bones appeared to belong to an adult male, and several features suggested an age compatible with a man in his 60s. These findings were presented as possible matches rather than firm proof. Some researchers argued that the data fit the historical time frame of Peter's death. Other specialists warned that such conclusions were tentative because of the limits of the testing available at the time and because ancient burial treatments could alter skeletal signals. The location of the bones deep inside a wall niche was itself telling. Archaeologists interpreted the placement as an intentional reburial. According to some experts, moving remains into wall spaces was a known practice in periods of persecution when communities wanted to protect relics from theft or destruction. The condition of the bones supported that reading. The surfaces showed marks and patterns consistent with being handled and rewrapped long before the modern excavation began. This suggested the remains had been moved in antiquity rather than during recent work. The rediscovery of the box created immediate tension. For some, it felt like confirmation of long-held hopes. For others, it raised alarms about procedure, chain of custody, and the danger of leaping to conclusions. While debate swirled, a closer look at the masonry surrounding the niche revealed fresh cracks and cavities. Stone seams opened where none had been seen before, hinting at a hidden layer beneath the necropolis. Experts planned to study the faint inscriptions and context around the niche. Their work would lead directly into questions that reached beyond the bones and into a much older past. The words in the stones. The team called in an epigrapher to study the faint scratches near the shrine. The markings looked disorganized, almost like random lines made by visitors who passed through in fear or hurry. After weeks of examination, the specialist identified a pattern. The scratches formed an acrostic, a coded message used by early Christians. The message translated to "Peter is within." The room fell silent when the finding was shared. It confirmed that the people who carved these marks believed they were standing at the true burial place of Peter. For the archaeologists, it was a rare moment when physical evidence and ancient tradition pointed in the same direction. Work continued behind the red wall. As debris was cleared, the team noticed stones that did not match the necropolis. These stones were older, their surfaces were rougher, and the color differed from the Roman blocks that surrounded them. When the archaeologists examined the edges, they noticed that the cuts were unfamiliar. Roman builders used predictable methods and consistent angles, but these stones had shapes that did not follow typical Roman practices. The deeper they went, the more the pattern changed. Some stones carried shallow carvings. The carvings were not letters and did not resemble Christian symbols. Several researchers compared photographs to collections of early Italic and Etruscan markings. A few specialists believed the lines and shapes were similar to symbols found at known Etruscan ritual sites. These proposals were presented cautiously, but the possibility raised immediate tension. The idea that something older than Rome was buried beneath Vatican Hill was not a small claim. Orientation tests were conducted on the uncovered blocks. Roman and Christian structures usually follow clear directional alignments. The layout here did not match those systems. Instead, the alignment showed similarities to Etruscan sacred directions, which were based on older ritual divisions of the sky. This discovery forced the team to reconsider their understanding of the site. If the alignment was ancient and intentional, then the hill had been a sacred location long before Roman settlement expanded into the area. Archaeologists shared their findings with caution. According to some of their internal reports, the stone arrangement suggested the remains of a structure that might have served religious functions for an earlier culture. Several experts proposed that it could be part of a forbidden temple. They used the term forbidden because later Roman authorities tried to suppress Etruscan religious practices as the empire grew. The implications were difficult to ignore. The evidence pointed to a layered history in which early Christian traditions were placed above a Roman necropolis, and that necropolis rested on an even older sacred site. For some on the team, this realization was unsettling. The Vatican was not only built over the memory of Peter, it was also built over the traces of a civilization that Rome may have attempted to erase. What began as a simple attempt to honor a pope revealed a past that challenged the story Rome had always told about its own beginnings. If you enjoyed watching this video, please like and subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.